Today on Tacos Tuesday, we answer all of your PPC questions live, as well as talk about dayparting, hourly bidding, what sellers can do to take advantage of AMC, and how to optimize your ads for Q4. This and more.
How cool is that? Pretty cool, I think. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Serious Sellers Podcast by Helium 10. I am your host, Bradley Sutton, and this is the show that's completely BS-free, unscripted and unrehearsed, organic conversation about serious strategies for serious sellers of any level in the e-commerce world. And this episode is our monthly live Tacos Tuesday show, where we talk about anything and everything Amazon, Walmart, PPC, and advertising related with different guests. And today's host is going to be Shivali Patel. Shivali, take it away.
I don't really want to waste any time. I'm going to actually bring up Jocelyn and have her kind of share a little bit about her if you don't know her already. So with that, hi, Jocelyn. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on today.
It's great to be here. This is my second Tacos Tuesday that I've joined. So some of you guys may recognize me, but others may not. I'm an account director here at Pacvue, which is obviously the other side of Helium 10. I focus on some of our largest enterprise brands covering Amazon and omni retailers and manage the full strategy across search, DSP, as well as involvement in content, retail, etc., everything that really goes into growing an enterprise business. So happy to be here.
So I guess we'll just kind of start off with talking a little bit about Q4, then maybe we can jump into some of those newer announcements from Accelerate or anything that you want to kind of dive into. So with Q4 being here, are there any sort of high level tips that you would want to make sure that our viewership really knows about?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been in Q4 planning for a long time. Obviously, we had Prime Big Deal Days last month, and then of course we have Cyber 5 coming up next week. And so there's been a lot of planning going on. I would say the best advice I can give is to really identify the goals for each of the tentpoles. What are you trying to accomplish as far as a sales goal, a new customer acquisition goal, etc. Really grounding your strategy in that first, and then of course expanding out to what the tactical implications are of all of that. The best advice, I would say, the piece that we have the most success with across the board, no matter how large or small or medium the brand is really executing dayparting effectively and making sure that you're showing up when you should be, especially during these tentpole events. We know behavior can be slightly different during a tentpole versus an everyday Tuesday, for example. And so really understanding the consumer behavior during Cyber 5, of course, during Prime Big Deal Days, Prime Day in July, etc. It does vary a little bit. And so taking a look at dayparting now before we get into next week and making sure that you're accounting for that into your campaigns is definitely a big tip for any of the tentpoles, but especially heading into Q4 and a very important time frame for almost every brand out there.
Yeah, definitely. And when would you recommend that somebody kind of starts to look into dayparting? Like, let's say they've been around for a while outside of just the seasonal aspects of the season.
Yeah, I think it's something that everyone can be adopting, as far as it's an easy way to make sure that you're reducing any wasted spend. We typically have ideas of how our consumers shop for our brand, but if we actually look at the data, it can be slightly different. And so really understanding where your consumers are shopping and when, as far as, we know health and wellness is usually in the morning, and then household is usually in the evening after work, but really making sure you use any kind of dayparting optimization to really zone in on some of those levers and hourly, daily, etc. I think anyone can benefit from it. So if you are at the point where you have significant and sufficient data to make those decisions, I would definitely start implementing that even outside of Q4.
I see Fred says worst time to launch. Would you agree with something like that, Jocelyn? I've actually launched before during Q4 and I was not paying necessarily 3 times. I do think it's quite niche dependent, but what are your thoughts on this?
We have a couple clients that are launching a new product now. I would say maybe not the week of Cyber 5 is a good idea, but it is definitely, I think, category dependent. CPCs are going to be definitely more expensive during these tentpoles, of course. So I would try and look at what are some of the keywords that you can win outside of the most expensive category terms that are going to be where you see most of that CPC inflation. So identifying pockets of opportunity that you can slowly scale outside of the incredibly competitive terms is going to be a way to launch within this time period without it being, exorbitantly expensive. But it is a tough time to launch a product no matter what. But just making sure that you are keeping a close eye on things so that you are not overpaying or wasting any of your launch budget. Because a lot of people obviously have a certain amount that they want to spend at the start, and making sure that doesn't run away from you is important.
I see a lot of people like this conversation topic because there's been a lot of follow-up questions. But then he said, the best I've seen is hourly bidding. Dayparting is in the past. And there were some questions on what hourly bidding is. So maybe you could elaborate for our viewers.
Yeah, so hourly bidding is, the next iteration of dayparting. When I speak about dayparting, I am talking about the hours even within a day. So a lot of the tools within Pacvue are hourly and daily, and you can set rules to adjust to every campaign's specific performance for every hour, for every day. So just, pausing or enabling at certain days, or bidding up by 25% in the afternoon and 25% down in the evening. That is very rudimentary dayparting. But there is, of course, the next iteration, and that is hourly bidding. So commenter is definitely right. It has evolved quite a bit over the last few years. And there are a lot more capabilities around hourly specific bidding. So that's what I mean when I say dayparting. It encompasses all of the really intraday dayparting as well.
I do want to come back to this topic, but let's go ahead and answer Mike's question here as well. He says, hi guys, my product launched on Amazon US 6 weeks ago, and I'm really struggling to get any sales. Have been advertising with auto and manual campaigns and monitoring, updating daily, spending between $30 to $50 per day on a $20 product and getting just a handful of sales in total. Have successfully launched in another territory, so I feel confident about the product and the listing. Are there any suggestions?
Yeah, I would say if you're really struggling to get something off the ground, looking at what is driving sales, I know you only have a handful of sales. I would look at what's driving engagement as far as click-through rate. Getting more people onto the page obviously increases your chances of a conversion. And so identifying what the KPIs that can help you outside of sales that are going to lead to sales. So I'd focus on what's giving the highest click-through rate and the highest engagement with your ads. Investing a bit more there, upping your chances of getting someone to an actual page, and making sure that you are optimizing what you can, even within, you have 6 weeks of data that should be sufficient to make some changes, spending $30 to $50 a day. Again, you should have some pockets to identify around what are the engagement drivers for your campaigns, whether they are auto or manual. And really, I would say letting auto have a good chance of generating data and leaning in there to make sure that you're really understanding where your product is surfacing on Amazon just automatically.
Hopefully that helps you answer your question. Here we have, what is the most efficient way to use dayparting to optimize exposure? I've used it before and found that I lost sales and exposure.
Yeah, so another kind of side of Pacvue is you can adjust your dayparting rules based on different KPIs. So for example, spend, ROAS, conversion rate, click-through rate, CPCs. I think they all behave slightly differently. If you are optimizing for ROAS, that can sometimes deflate your spend because it's only focusing on the most efficient time frames. I like optimizing towards conversion rate because it's optimizing towards consumer behavior. It's less influenced by competitor activity. And so identifying what is converting versus the cost and the spend and all of that usually helps better align your dayparting schedule for a consumer's actual behavior versus relying on CPC inflation for competitor challenges, things like that. So understanding the role of your campaign, whether that's discovery through auto or it's truly generating sales around category or brand, and aligning the KPI that you're adjusting your dayparting schedule off of is going to be the best way to really optimize your dayparting strategy.
Do you want to see how your listing or maybe a competitor's listing rates as to best practices for listing optimization? Or maybe you want to compare a group of ASINs or Amazon products to see how they compare to each other. Maybe you want to see within seconds the top keywords for a single listing or a group of listings. You can do that and more with the Helium 10 tool Listing Analyzer. For more information, go to h10.me/listing analyzer.
Okay, we have Scott here that says, launching my first product in a few weeks, early December. What's the best strategy campaign setup-wise? Should I start with auto campaigns, then transition over to manual? Can I spend around $100 a day? This is a $25 or $30 product.
Yeah, I would say any launch strategy, I would start with using Helium 10 to really understand the keywords in your category first. Auto campaigns are a good tool to understand where Amazon thinks your product should be surfacing. So utilizing those to get some learnings around what is actually doing well as far as keywords for your specific product. And then also launching a couple manual campaigns around keywords that you think you have the best chance of winning. I would steer at first launch away from some of those very, very high level category terms. Toothpaste, for example, is going to be very competitive. It's going to be very hard to break into that space. So looking more at some of the longer tail keywords and using some of the auto campaign data that you get from the launch is going to kind of ease the ramp up for a new product. Especially with $100 a day, you should be able to get a decent amount of data to start making decisions off of in a few weeks.
Definitely. And Jocelyn, maybe you can elaborate a bit on what Pacvue is, because I see we have that question as well, and how it might differ from Helium 10. Because for this question in particular, I could tell you to go inside of Cerebro and, find the longer tail keywords, because we have a word count filter where you can put in a minimum for 2 or 3 and find those keywords or phrases that have higher buyer intent, which is exactly what Jocelyn is talking about. So you can find keywords that way, sift them down, and then do maybe exact match campaigns, or even find ASINs that have higher price points than your product, or maybe offer some sort of incentive over your competitor products and run ads on those products instead as you're launching. But yeah, going back in, let's just kind of reel it back and explain a little bit about what Pacvue can do, or how it's different from Helium 10.
Yeah, so Pacvue is more on the enterprise side of the business, and it is almost entirely focused on ads as far as an execution standpoint. We have commerce, which is really understanding like the seller behavior. It connects to the seller API and the vendor API. That's really more for an operational management. But Pacvue itself at its core is the ad side of the business. We do have a sprinkling of Helium 10 features within the Pacvue tool, and then Adtomic is similarly based on Pacvue data as well. So there is an interweaving between the two. We are sister companies and we serve, two halves of the pie. So we're a little bit more focused on the ads side of things, less so like the seller research and all of that. That is still Helium 10 for sure, and really where a lot of those amazing features lie from a research and launch execution standpoint.
So continuing on the ad questions, because obviously that is something that Pacvue does really, really well. We have Michael McKenzie asking, hi, I always get confused on when to use negative exact and negative phrase and auto exact phrase in broad campaigns. Can you please assist?
Yes. Negative exact I would use if there are very specific keywords that you do not want to be surfacing for. Negative phrase we use for our own brand term or a competitor term. If I have a category campaign and I want to make sure that these ads are not surfacing if someone's searching our brand term, because I want to make sure the brand keyword bids that I'm placing are what's surfacing when someone's searching that. I may do, a phrase match of my brand name to make sure it includes every single iteration of that, to make sure that we are completely excluding any brand searches. And then similarly with competitor terms, if I don't want to have any competitor terms surfacing for a category or a brand campaign, I would use that to make sure I'm encompassing all of those iterations. But again, negative exact are if you have historical performance, this 3-word keyword does not perform well and you want to negate that, I would use that as your negative keyword list. And then phrase really can encompass broader general themes that you want to make sure you're not showing up for in certain campaigns.
Here I see we have, for Christmas products, what date should be your peak spend? Great question.
It's a great question. Christmas products, if that's gifts, now is obviously the time to do that. If it's decorations and things like that, I would say right now. I, like many people, wait to put up my Christmas lights until after Thanksgiving. And so we obviously have, a week and a half for that. And so I would say for Christmas specific products, as far as like decor and all of that, I'd say it's right now. But obviously for gifts, Amazon's extended delivery, which has really evolved, I think, over the last 5 to 10 years that some of us have been working in the industry. The cutoff date used to be December 10th, 15th of, it's not going to make it in time. Now it's obviously much closer to the actual day of the holiday. And so it does extend a little bit closer to, December 20th, December 21st, 22nd, et cetera. So the shopping season has definitely extended, of course, with additional tentpoles like Prime Big Deal Days and everything, but it's also extended deeper into December as well.
I've actually heard really interesting strategies for Christmas. I know people, or sellers rather, who run Christmas campaigns year round for giftable items, and that way they're always ranking at the top So I think it also is quite dependent on what your budget is or how long you want to run it. But here we have this question that says, can we use Atomic for these strategies? There's quite a bit of things that Atomic really does. So I would even recommend going into Atomic, and at the top of all of our tools, we have these video buttons. And so if you click those, you'll be able to just kind of follow through. But you can do things like AI. You can actually use and have AI basically management of your ads. You can have suggestions. If, let's say, you're getting 20 clicks, but no conversions, maybe that's something that you want to negative target. You can go in and set up some rules for that. So that way it's automatically finding and harvesting new keywords. So it really kind of depends on what strategy you're talking about, which one you're looking for. But I do think the best way to learn is by just going in and taking a look at those videos and trying it for your own products. Kim is asking, there's a niche category competing directly with direct China sellers and have a 6% tacos goal to hit margin targets. What would be the best hourly bidding and or dayparting strategy to set rules and goals?
I would say definitely a conversion or a return focused dayparting strategy. That's really going to make sure that you're maximizing sales as well as efficiency. So I would focus more on that, less so around CPCs or impressions or spend, which is more so going to adjust spend numbers versus actual conversion. So if you have a tacos goal specifically, I would make sure that your budget set for each month is aligned roughly to what you expect your total revenue to be, but focusing more so on conversion and efficiency tactics versus exposure and engagement tactics is going to be where you see a lot more of that efficiency for your total tacos goal.
Definitely. I think you need a great listing to go along with a great product and great ad set. Mike asks, when do PPC costs generally reduce after Black Friday period? Will it be in early December, post Cyber Monday, or through into January time?
Yeah, it's definitely category dependent as far as we talked about, what is the consumer behavior. I think the post Black Friday period is going to be really like that week after Cyber Monday. I think it's good to stay on top of things and make sure that you're reducing your bids as well. Immediately following Cyber Monday, it's kind of like the CPC hangover, we say a bit, of people forgetting to reduce their bids, forgetting to kind of lock things back down after a huge tentpole. So making sure that you stay on top of that so that you're not overpaying is going to be helpful. But generally, it's going to be like immediately after Black Friday, and then again, certainly as we get to the close of December 20th and onward, it's really where we're going to see things kind of start to normalize, unless you are in like a new year, new you category, which is, of course, when it starts to inflate.
Here we have James Pavley, hopefully I pronounced that right, asking, ASIN targeting against a direct competitor, is it worth overbidding against them, even if it causes me to take a bit of a loss, simply to stop them gaining as much traction? Do you have examples from your own experience?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting question. I think as far as competitor targeting, ASIN targeting is much more successful than just keyword of targeting on your competitor's keyword. So showing up on their page, at least to your point of stopping them from getting traction is a good option. I would look at ASIN specifically that your option is either cheaper or has better reviews or is better price, etc., to make sure that you have a good chance of winning. If you want, as far as like overbidding, if by overbidding you mean spending kind of at a loss just to stop them from gaining traction, I think that's something you need to make sure like aligns with your tacos goal, your profitability goal, etc. But they are probably not going to be gaining so much significantly more traction without you on their page versus if you were, because a portion of traffic obviously comes from the product detail page, but if they're investing heavily in the search result, etc., then your bidding on their page is going to help, but it's not going to be what is going to stop that traction in its tracks. So I think when it comes to overbidding, you just need to make sure that fits for you and your financials, but it's not going to completely stop the ball from rolling down the hill, I would say.
How often should you adjust dayparting schedules once they're set? Can some run indefinitely, or are there seasonal differences?
I would definitely say there's seasonal differences, like I said, around tentpoles, Prime Day, etc. Back to school, there's a lot of micro seasons even within the year outside of like the Amazon-owned tentpoles. So I think definitely letting them run for a little bit and then making sure that they're adjusting and changing a bit to the seasonal strategies. We definitely have certain specific dayparting strategy, rules that we create for different tentpoles as well as different times of the year. If we are trying to spend aggressively in the end of December, heading into January for the new year health and wellness season, for example. So I would say most rules should not be set indefinitely and never reviewed and never touched. Especially for Dayparting, there are seasonal nuances throughout the year that you should be taking into account.
David asks, I have different types of campaigns that are excellent, 10% ACOS, 10% ROAS, or $10 ROAS, CRV of 50% generating 10K per week. My campaign has 3 to 5 ASINs with 30 keywords with exact and broad types. When should I segment the campaign with 1 ASIN with 5 top keywords with each type broad and then exact, and then do the same for the other ASIN and so on?
I would say broad. If you have enough data, you should be moving away from those and moving into more phrase and exact match. If you have sufficient data, which it sounds like you do, as far as 10K in sales a week, etc., I would say any kind of campaign should kind of be moving out of this launch phase and moving into more of a refined strategy where you're identifying what are the top performing keywords, the top 5, as you said, and shifting more of your spend to those so that you can control how you're spending, control how you're bidding, and making sure that you're investing in the places that you should be. So I'd say at this point, it's probably good to start migrating out of kind of that launch and learning phase and into more of the refinement phase of I have sufficient data and I want to start making changes to optimize this towards efficiency and conversion, etc.
Okay. Hadas asks, is there a way to know if the competitors raise the bid on a specific keyword for Pacvue?
This is a great question. We're always asked, what are our competitors spending? There's certain ways to kind of back into that. Obviously, some of the key indicators that they've raised their bid on specific keywords is your individual CPC for the term, if that starts to inflate without your changes, as well as share of voice. So paid share of voice, if they've gained share of voice specifically on that individual keyword, that's a good indication that there are competitive changes that they're making. So looking at your impact to your spend as well as share of voice for a competitor as well as yourself is a good way to understand how the competitors are changing their spending patterns for any specific keyword or general category.
I'm in a category where there's lots of window shopping as it's a visual and therefore very subjective product. And these window shoppers are costing me. Long tail keywords have low traffic and the keywords with higher search volume are both expensive and saturated by my competitors. Are there any suggestions of other strategies to consider?
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. I would say looking at like cost per acquisition, I don't know exactly what the category is, but if it is window shopping, it usually takes, a lot longer to make a decision, make a conversion. So looking at what the cost for each of those orders is, and if that's something that you want to play in, and really kind of identifying like a goal cost per acquisition would be a good place to start. As far as other strategies, I would say competitor product targeting is a good one here. If they are window shopping, those are typically cheaper than the search result keyword searches and more aligned with kind of the window shopping. If they're on a competitor's page, they may also be looking at similar products, et cetera, that are ads. So I would say expanding into product targeting is going to be helpful to kind of reduce some of the cost, especially if you're bidding and playing in some of those very competitive keyword terms.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways that you can also go about keyword research as well. If you go watch the keyword research masterclasses that Bradley does, there's ways that you can take a look at relative rank, which essentially tells you how you're stacking up with the competition inside of Helium 10. Or even if you say that you want to find your ASIN is ranked somewhere between positions 15 to 150, and then the competitor ASINs, at least 1 to 2 of them are ranking somewhere in the top 10. You can find those keywords where maybe your competitors are beating you on and you can try to change strategy, or vice versa, right? Like you can end up finding the ones where you're top 10, but your competitors are, or you're not ranking at all and none of your competitors are. So the opportunity keywords really, and that might help save you a little bit of money and hopefully find the space where you can meet demand, but your competitors aren't yet utilizing, because very unlikely that they'll change their strategy overnight. Okay, is there a way to influence Rufus AI via the campaigns? I love questions about AI because I'm also very, very curious about AI in general.
We've been asked it a lot. It's a great question. As far as anything on Amazon, no. The only thing I would say is to make sure that your product detail content is as up to date as possible with the best information you have. As far as where it sources from, it does source from other sides of the internet. It sources from Google result, your website, etc. So understanding like if you have a presence elsewhere, making sure that everything is fully optimized. Our prediction is that eventually you'll be able to optimize it and probably influence it through advertising, because Amazon, usually monetizes almost everything. In its current state, there is nothing you can do from like an ad strategy. It's really focused on SEO and the content that you do have, again, on Amazon as well as off Amazon. So those are the pieces that you can influence, but there's very little-ish information on where Rufus is pulling from outside of Amazon information, Google, SEO, websites, etc. So making sure that your whole digital footprint is where you want it to be and optimize as much as you can through the most current content is the only way to positively influence that. But again, it's probably going to be an ads opportunity somewhere.
I did want to ask, how do you feel like sellers should really be taking advantage of all this new access to AMC?
Yeah, I think it's been a great development. Obviously, when AMC first rolled out, it was very exclusive to someone that had SQL data, someone that had the time and the resources to activate it. And so it has definitely been democratized a lot more, especially for sellers that do not run DSP. So AMC for search, there's a lot to take advantage of as far as what are some of your new to brand ASINs to look for. What are the best paths to conversion as far as a combination of sponsored brand and sponsored product, etc. And then there's, of course, the AMC audiences for search, which has been a very hot topic and a big topic of discussion as far as how do we execute it. It's, of course, a bid up feature only, not bid down. And so really identifying what are the highest performing audiences, whether those are people who have engaged with your ads before or they are lookalikes from repeat purchasers, things like that, layering that onto primarily your category terms. Again, some of those terms are very broad and very competitive. And so making sure that you're winning the consumers that you are really adamant about winning and have the best chance at winning is going to be kind of the key of weaving AMC into search. And then, of course, really like additional insights that you can pull with AMC for search only, which is also a new development.
And for those people who don't know what AMC is, Paul is asking, what is AMC? Maybe you can elaborate there.
AMC stands for Amazon Marketing Cloud. It's a data clean room that allows you to pull in multiple data points. It's a fancy way of saying it basically Amazon's analytic platform. It allows you to get a deeper understanding beyond just, return, click-through rate, et cetera, more so behavioral insights and consumer path insights. So it's been very helpful to understand what is, the optimal investment across different ad types, as well as who are the audiences that are really successful and have converted really well. And so it is, again, really just kind of the data extension of Amazon that other retailers do not have. I would say probably more retailers are going to eventually move to that model. But it is really quite a differentiator for Amazon to have access to all this extra data.
Our campaigns are well optimized, like mentioned above. Our ROAS are $10 to $20. ACoS is 5 to 20%. I'd like to increase and dominate my market share. What should I do?
Well, if you want to dominate, it's obviously more aggressive spending, more aggressive bidding. If you already have, this $10 to $20 return, understanding what is a range that you're comfortable with in order to capitalize on more market share is going to be where you're able to start taking away some of that from competitors. So really understanding what is the budget that you have and how low are the range of return that you're looking to get in order to gain share, understanding what those parameters are, and then going forth and executing. But it's going to be more aggressive and more aggressive spending and more aggressive bidding.
Let's say that we have somebody who is kind of optimizing last minute. Hopefully you guys have all already optimized for Q4, but do you have any sort of like top tip that you think people can go in and do right now that they might not be aware of, but would be helpful?
Top tips to go do right now. I would say creating any kind of, if you don't have an optimization rule set up for anything, that would be the easiest thing to get off the ground, along with the dayparting, like I mentioned. I would say, again, aligning to what the goals and objectives are and making sure that your campaigns are reflective of that, making sure that if you are participating in T12, which starts in a couple days, you're ready for that. Your campaign budgets are open. Your bids are changed. Making sure that you are ready to take on the extra traffic, or make sure that you're refraining from taking on too much traffic, et cetera. But making sure that you have a plan of action of day of whenever your tentpole really starts for you is going to be important as far as the planning and execution to make sure everything goes smoothly.
Great answer. Have you seen more efficiency through a certain kind of ad type?
Yeah, like I said, the product targeting is definitely been something that we've explored a lot in the last few temples because it is the cheaper alternative than the general search results. You're kind of piggybacking as well on the extra traffic that other pages are getting. And so it is a good way to surface in other areas. It's going to have slightly lower conversion because it's not, the general browse page, but it's going to be cheaper. And if you do still get decent conversion from it, then you will see an efficient return from those campaigns.
And I know we talked about optimizing because that was the question I asked, but what about somebody who is launching? Maybe you could talk a little bit about the campaign setup or what you recommend. Should somebody start with auto broad right from the get-go before they even have any reviews, or do you recommend waiting? What's your stance on that?
Yeah, it kind of depends on how much you want to pay at the start. Reviews, like we talked about earlier, are one of the hardest things to get on Amazon. They make it very difficult, it's kind of funny because it's supposed to be easy. That was one of the new unboxed announcements, was that new product package, basically to get things off the ground. It's very expensive, and most people aren't going to have that as an option for them. So I would say starting with auto, low and slow, to make sure that you're not overspending. And then as those reviews come in, ramping up spend more aggressively. There is some, variation strategy that you can play with as far as if you have existing products that are similar, or, this is an extension of a current product line, varying those together so that product also gets the benefit of those reviews is one way to kind of boost everything at the start. But that's obviously contingent on if that's applicable. But variation strategy is definitely something I would play around with at the start.
Okay. David asks, for a branded keyword campaign, what should be the top of search percentage?
It depends. It should be very, very high. Obviously, it's going to depend on your competitive activity, though. I would say it should be something 90 plus. But if you start noticing that going down, you can definitely, I would say, look at share of voice and see what competitor is causing that. You may have to, fight fire with fire and start going after their brand terms, but your branded terms should be very high. And if it starts going down, or you notice that it's lower than you would expect it to be, that's definitely something to look into and make sure that you're shoring up your brand defense if you need to.
Circling back to James's question for the gold pan targeting campaign, he says it's essentially a very, very wide-reaching vague campaign with a very low bid, a few cents, to mop up the occasional win, typically a conversion of 1% or less.
It's definitely a fine strategy as far as rounding out a fully fleshed account. I would not rely on that by any means, because to your point, that's an occasional sale, an occasional win. So if there's extra places that you just want to shore up and see if you get a win from a very general term, I think that's definitely fine. But I would focus on more specific strategies around what's going to lead to more sustainable conversions. But it's not detrimental in any way. It's just how additive is more the question.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn, today for being here. I know you've added a lot of value and you've contributed immensely to all these questions that are being asked. So we appreciate your time. And those of you that tuned in, thanks for being here. We look forward to seeing you on the next Tacos Tuesday.